Meeting number 19 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Transport, Infrastructure and Communities. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of January 25th, 2021. The proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website. So you are aware, the webcast will always show the person speaking rather than the entirety of the committee. To ensure an orderly meeting, I would like to outline a few rules to follow. First off, members and witnesses may speak in the official language of their choice. Interpretation services are available for this meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either Floor, English, or French. For members participating in person, proceed as you usually would when the whole committee is meeting in person in the committee room. Keep in mind the directives from the Board of Internal Economy regarding masking and health protocols. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. If you are on video conference, please click on the microphone icon to unmute yourself. Those in the room, your microphone will be controlled as normal by the Proceedings and Verification Officer. A reminder that all comments by members and witnesses should be addressed to the chair. When you are not speaking, your mic should be on mute. With regard to a speaking list, the committee clerk and I will, as always, do the best we can to maintain the order of speaking for all members, whether they are participating virtually or in person. Members, pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Thursday, October 29th, 2020, the committee is meeting today to continue its study on the Canada Infrastructure Bank. Now I'd like to welcome our witnesses. First off, we have the Honorable Catherine McKenna, Minister of Infrastructure and Communities. Mr. McKenna, welcome. Following her, we have witnesses from her department, the Office of Infrastructure Canada, Kelly Gillis, Deputy Minister, Infrastructure and Communities, Glenn Campbell, Assistant Deputy Minister, Investment Partnerships and Innovation, Mary McKay, Director General, Alternative Finance, Investment Partnerships and Innovation, and Lisa Mitchell, Senior Director, Investment Partnerships and Innovation. Members, we'll start off with the meeting with Minister McKenna with her 5-minute opening. Mr. McKenna, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'd like to start by acknowledging that I'm in Ottawa on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe peoples. I'm really delighted to be here with my deputy, Kelly Gillis, and her amazing team. Good afternoon to everyone on the committee. It's great to see you again. Thank you very much for inviting me to discuss the importance of investing in infrastructure for Canadians and the role the Canada Infrastructure Bank plays in our infrastructure plan. I want to thank the committee for undertaking this really important study. First, I'd like to say that our government is committed to making critical infrastructure investments across the country that will help us build back better, that will create good jobs, grow our economy, create inclusive communities, and help tackle climate change. There's no question that the Canada Infrastructure Bank plays an important role in our plan. The bank has already committed to infrastructure projects that contribute to creating jobs and growth, building inclusive and resilient communities, and helping meet our climate targets. By attracting private sector and institutional investors to infrastructure projects in the Canadian public interest, the Canada Infrastructure Bank brings a new approach that will impact how infrastructure in Canada is financed. Il est clair que la Banque de l'Infrastructure du Canada
It is clear that the Infrastructure Bank of Canada plays a very important role. The bank has already committed to building stronger infrastructure that will create a stronger industry in Canada, and by attracting private sector interest and institutional interest to these projects that are for the public good of Canadians, the Canada Infrastructure Bank is introducing new approaches to infrastructure in Canada.
Challenge Canadians in countless ways. On top of the impact of the illness, death, and public health measures to stop the spread of infection, we're now facing the challenge of building our economy back. The work we do, the decisions we make in the coming months and years will define our country's path for decades to come. This is why the government is undertaking Canada's first national infrastructure assessment. By mapping out where we need to go, where gaps exist, what needs to be prioritized, and how we will finance the investments in infrastructure that we need, we will enable provinces, territories, municipalities, and Indigenous communities to identify projects of key importance and get them built for the best interest of Canadians. Let me take a couple of minutes to talk about where the Canada Infrastructure Bank is today. It's entered a new phase of development under a strong and capable leadership team. The bank is committed to developing and executing $35 billion in investments to get maximum long-term benefits for Canadians in 5 priority areas: clean power, renewable generation, storage and transmission, broadband in underserved communities, building retrofits, agriculture irrigation projects to help prairie farmers, and zero-emission buses and charging infrastructure. As an arm's-length Crown corporation, the government sets the policy priorities, and the CIB's board of directors is responsible for the organization's management and investment decisions. To ensure the organization's priorities remain aligned with the government's, last month I updated the CIB's Statement of Priorities and Accountabilities. It now includes a target for the bank to invest at least $1 billion in total across its 5 priority areas in revenue-generating projects that benefit Indigenous peoples. De plus, l'automne dernier, notre gouvernement s'est joint à la
What's more, last fall, our government has worked with the Infrastructure Bank to put over a 3-year period program. The growth, which it deals with some $1 billion over 3 years, it will cover the 5 major pillars: clean energy, energy-friendly buildings, agricultural irrigation, and zero-emission buses.
First, with a $407 million investment towards the largest agricultural irrigation project in Alberta. Recently, it announced an engagement with what is anticipated to be the largest battery storage facility in Canada, working with an Indigenous community. The bank is also backing the REM, the largest public transit project in Montreal in half a century, and it's looking at how to expand the capacity of the new Westminster Rail Bridge in BC to boost trade and transportation. The CIB now has priority sectors, an investment plan, and a strong leadership team to play a significant role in getting more and better projects built for Canadians across the country. Je suis confiante que les investissements de la Banque d'Infrastructure du Canada.
I'm quite confident that the investments of the CIB will stimulate the growth, economic growth in Canada, and provide the infrastructure that we need in all communities to provide long-term success and growth in Canada.
Is investing in thousands of projects across the country, creating jobs and building more inclusive communities. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you, Minister McKenna. Well done. We're now going to move on to our first round of questions. We have, starting off, the Conservative Party, we have Mr. Scheer, followed by Ms. Jacek of the Liberals, Mr. Barcelou-Duval of the Bloc, and Mr. Bachrach of the NDP. Mr. Scheer, floor is yours for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister. You referenced a couple times in your opening remarks the intent of the Canadian Infrastructure Bank was to unlock private sector investment. So can you inform this committee to date how much private sector investment this bank has been able to secure?
Minister McKenna.
Well, thank you very much, and I'd like to thank the member opposite, who is also my critic. It's great to see you here. And I have a list of projects in your riding that I know you'd be very interested. That we've approved 43 projects worth over $763 million. The Canada Infrastructure Bank is moving forward on a number of really great projects. The one that is probably close to your heart is the investment in Alberta in irrigation. That's a great project with the government of Alberta, who clearly recognizes the critical importance of the Canada Infrastructure Bank in getting major projects built and bringing in the private sector. The REM project in Montreal, pour nos amis à Montréal, ils voient qu'il est en construction.
For our friends in Montreal, they see that this
a project with the Caisse de dépôt that is moving forward. I can give you a whole range of examples of projects that are good projects going to make a difference.
Minister, I can find a list of those projects as well on the government's website, but the bank was designed in a very specific way. The bank was designed to not be a traditional funding envelope, but the promises were made that the bank would leverage private sector investment, that with the way that it was operating, the innovative way that you were designing this program was that not only would Canadian tax dollars be put into these projects, but private sector investment in the ownership of these types of projects would follow. So a very simple question, you must keep track of this. How much private sector investment has been committed to the projects that the Canadian Infrastructure Bank is currently involved in?
Minister?
Well, I just want to confirm that I totally agree that the bank has an important role in attracting private sector investment, in particular institutional investors, because that's our workers' dollars at work, Canadian worker dollars. So if we look at the REM project, which is an investment with the Caisse de dépôt, that's $3 billion that the Caisse de dépôt has invested. But also, I mean, I think it's not just about bringing in the private sector. It's actually getting good projects built in the public interest. That's why we got the bank, because we can actually get more infrastructure built.
But in fairness, you haven't gotten any built. This bank has been around for almost 4 years now. You've completed 0 projects. The criticism of the Réseau project was that the Canadian Infrastructure Bank's commitment was just replacing what normally would have been allocated from different funding envelopes within Infrastructure Canada. You've got 12 or 13 projects up on the Canadian Infrastructure Bank's website. Many of these projects, the current status is just providing advisory services or memorandums of understanding. So the question is, where is all this private sector investment? What is the total amount? Promises were made about unleashing and leveraging 2 times, 4 times private sector investment. This is a $35 billion bank. How much private sector investment has been committed through the Canadian Infrastructure Bank's current list of projects?
Minister?
So, alors je vais répondre en français.
I'm going to answer in French because I think it's really important. I think that the government of Quebec is very proud of the REM project with the investment of some $3 billion almost, from the Caisse de dépôt. Working with the government of Quebec and institutional investors.
Transit project in Quebec in over 50 years, 680,000 tons of greenhouse gases reduced over 25 years, 34,000 jobs. These are really important projects, and the bank is advancing on a whole range of projects.
I'm asking for a total amount of private sector investment. That's the question. Not just, we can all agree. Our party made commitments to public transit. We committed to expanding the GO line. We've made commitments for infrastructure in Montreal and those types of public transits. But here's the thing with the infrastructure bank. This was supposed to be a marquee institution. This was a marquee project. This was the Prime Minister's brilliant new innovative way to build a country. I mean, your government courted investors worth hundreds of billions of dollars, the richest bankers, the wealthiest hedge fund managers. You even held a fancy party with all the bells and whistles at the Shangri-La Hotel, trying to unlock $16 trillion in institutional funds that you claimed were floating around the world waiting to invest. And so far, you haven't been able to complete a single thing. Your government, your ministers, your CEOs at the bank have all made amazing claims that the $35 billion that the infrastructure bank has worth of taxpayers' money would be able to unlock 2 times, 4 times, even 7 times the investment from the private sector. You've got a dozen or so projects listed on your website. Most of those are at the memorandum of understanding phase or the advisory services phase. It doesn't seem to me that providing advisory services on a project is going to unleash and unlock that private sector investment. So where is all this private sector money that you claimed would be coming in to take an ownership position to replace the need for taxpayers' money? In other words, a total, not just one project, but total. So we can evaluate if you're hitting your own metric. Your own metric is at least 2 times, maybe 4 times private sector investment. So what is the grand total of private sector investment in ownership of the projects that the Canadian Infrastructure Bank is currently involved in?
Mr. McKenna?
So I'd like to clarify a number of things. So the idea of a Canada Infrastructure Bank came from the Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Minister. But this is an idea about how do you get more infrastructure built. I would hope that the member opposite, being from a Conservative party, would think that it's a good idea to work with our pension funds, some of the largest investors
Just
in
haven't got it done. That's the
infrastructure.
problem. You've got zero
Well,
projects completed.
I think that the member opposite is probably sophisticated enough to understand that projects don't get built in a day, and that actually advisory services matter because you actually need to develop the projects, and we are moving ahead. And if you look at the REM project, it brought in $1.28 billion with CDPQ. If you take the Alberta irrigation project, which reached financial close in December, it includes $163 million investment from private irrigation districts. And my goal is to get more and better infrastructure built at a time where it could not be more important. We're in the largest recession since the Great Depression. We're very fortunate that our government is investing in infrastructure. It would be interesting to know if your if your party is going to run again on a campaign to cut $18 billion in infrastructure investments, including kill the Canada Infrastructure Bank. We're about getting more built. We're about working with institutional investors in Canada so that we can do that, so we can make sure that we leverage the private sector, so that we manage risks, so we can get more and better infrastructure built that is in the public interest for Canadians.
Thank you, Minister McKenna. We're now going to move on to Mr. Scheer. Now we're going to move on to the Liberals. Ms. Jacek, you have the floor for 6 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Minister McKenna, for being with us today with your officials. On Tuesday, we heard some very interesting testimony, in particular from Concert Infrastructure, Mr. Bain, who also worked at Infrastructure Ontario, someone very, very experienced in terms of delivering projects. And his comment was that, of course, they don't happen overnight. And as I think we're well aware, the Canada Infrastructure Bank is particularly charged with looking at complex projects. So could you comment in terms of how you see the process that was initiated a number of years ago, how it's developing, and how you're making progress on those projects?
Minister.
Well, thanks very much for the question. It actually was really interesting testimony. I think you get good witnesses who have very, very different perspectives on the Canada Infrastructure Bank. But as Mr. Bain pointed out, I mean, the real opportunity is to how we look at how we can get more infrastructure built. But these projects do take a number of years. You do have to start somewhere. You do have to start with feasibility studies, with MOUs, and work up to building the projects. And this is a real opportunity. I mean, if you look at some of the projects, so I've talked about the REM in Montreal, the Alberta irrigation project that's a partnership with the Conservative Premier who understands the importance of the Canada Infrastructure Bank. One of a really great projects was the Anita Energy Storage Project. That's a partnership with a First Nations community, and it's going to be the largest battery storage project, I believe, in North America. And this is really, how do you get more built, but also, how do we bring in Indigenous people so that they share in the benefits of this? There's a Kivalek hydrofiber link MOU that would be a transmission line, 1,200 kilometer, 150 megawatt transmission line from Nunavut to New Brunswick. The Tallston Hydroelectric Project. I could go on. There's a whole range of diverse projects that are in the priority areas. And this is really, as I said, it's about getting more infrastructure built for Canadians. That when I look at the needs, I go to communities across the countries, to mayors, for premiers, to Canadians. They want more and better infrastructure built because it creates jobs, it creates growth, it increases Canada's competitiveness, improves the quality of life for Canadians. And of course, it drives us to a net zero future because climate change is the other crisis that we're in. We're in a health and economic crisis now, but we're also in the climate crisis. And so the infrastructure bank is not the only way we are funding infrastructure, that's for sure, but it is a critically important part of our plan and an opportunity to get more and better infrastructure built.
Thank you, Minister. If I could turn to a priority area for my constituents in Markham-Stouffville, public transit. As you know, Minister, you have visited us in York Region a number of times. I actually have 4 GO train stations in my riding, and I was very pleased to see the GO expansion as one of the priority areas. But beyond that, could you just detail for us what the CIB is going to be doing overall in terms of public transit?
Minister.
Well, thank you very much. I think that this is a critical area of investment for Canada, for the Canada Infrastructure Bank. We need to deal with congestion. We need to deal with also the pollution, air pollution caused by transportation, and it's one of our largest categories of emissions. Over 20% of our emissions come from transportation. We just made a very big announcement, first ever commitment by government to permanent public transit funding, $15 billion in additional money. In terms of the bank, public transit is one of its 5 priority areas. There's $5 billion for the bank to invest in projects. We've seen them already investing in the REM, but there's obviously a lot of other opportunities. And in its growth plan, which is a more recent plan focused on the pandemic in the next 3 years, creating jobs and growth, it's committed $1.5 billion to zero emission buses and related infrastructure. And I think this is incredibly important. I'm sure in your community, folks would love to be riding in zero emission buses. They're quieter, they're cleaner. Often they're made in Canada. It's a great story about Canadian innovation from bus companies from New Flyer to Novo Bus to Lion Electric to Ballard fuel cell buses. And so this is a real opportunity for Canada to be leading the way, to be creating jobs, growth, and of course, building cleaner and more conclusive communities.
Ms. Jacek?
And finally, in terms of some of what we also heard in terms of the CIB model, there was some statements made that there was some sort of mandate that assets would turn to the private sector, would become owned by the private sector. Could you please tell us if there's any mandate like that for the Canada Infrastructure Bank?
Minister?
So I want to be clear that this isn't about privatizing public assets. It's actually bringing in private sector investments so we can support more public, more infrastructure in the public interest for Canadians. I think that's a really important point. I think that this is really how do we leverage dollars? How do we leverage pension plans of Canadian workers? So they go to work, those dollars go to work in Canada to building more infrastructure. But this isn't a plan to go privatize all public infrastructure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jacek, and thank you, Minister McKenna. We're now going to move on to the block. Mr. Brasseau-Deville.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll begin where we just left off with Ms. Jacek's questions. You've just said that the goal of the bank is not to privatize infrastructure, but to bring in private investors. To say that you were to privatize would make private investors run away. So in the REM project, will it be extended? When will this occur? Is this a question or a statement? It's a question and an affirmation. I'm just like your comments. That's all. I just want to be clear. The CIB's mandate is not to privatize infrastructures. The bank's goal is to be the public dispenser, the public sponsor of projects. And so our goal is to help fund projects. Well, I understand that, but if the Caisse du dépôt of the Placement du Québec involves a foreign entity, would they be obliged to do that? Let me be clear again. The CIB's goal is not to put the government of Quebec or the Caisse du dépôt in a situation where you would have a difficulty with, say, the Bloc Québécois. We want to build structures with Madam Minister, you're not answering my question. What is the
interpreters are having a tough time when you guys are sort of crossing over each other, and I know from listening to the interpreter, it's very difficult to segregate who's speaking at one time. So if we can try to give a breath or two before each one wants to speak, I'd appreciate that, and it makes it a lot easier on the interpreters. Thank you. Mr. Brasseau-Deville, go ahead.
Mais en fait,
Well, I was just wanting to have a yes or no answer. Is there anything that would prevent the Caisse de Dépôt of building the rest of the réseau? Well, I think you should be speaking to the government of Quebec. That's not our role. The role of the infrastructure bank is to see how it can help the building undertaken by the government of Quebec. There you have mass transit in Montreal. That is something that's very important for the government there. Thank you for your answer. But with respect to Madame Jacek, you said that the bank wasn't going to be interested, was not interested in privatization. My second question is, since we've talked a lot about the REM, the government that you were part of announced some 1 point something billions of dollars for infrastructure, and now you're looking for projects. That $1.68 billion in subsidies into 1.68 billion in loans. Do you think you're going to be a winner by doing that? Is that better for your government to do that? The lights are shutting down here. I don't know what's happening. I think it's important to be clear here. The Infrastructure Bank doesn't have any mandate to privatize or to acquire assets. If I were to speak to Montrealers, to the government of Quebec, I would say that the REM is going to be a beautiful, big project. What more can be done? I spoke to the government in Quebec yesterday. Yes, let's try to do better, expand. Yes, thank you, Madam Minister. But it's a project that is very important to Montreal. It reduces GHGs, it increases mass transit, public transport. How can that not be good for Quebec and for Canada? Yes. Is it better, though, to call it a loan or a subsidy? That's the question I'm trying to get at here. With respect to the infrastructure bank, are we better off with a loan or a subsidy? I can't second guess what is going to be done in terms of what the bank is going to decide about financing. But I think that when you promote a project,
You have a point of order, Ms. Jacek, go ahead.
I am hearing the interpretation at the same volume as the speaker, and it's impossible to understand what's going on.
Okay, thank you. Once again, if we can have one speaker at a time, it makes it a lot easier for the interpreters. Ms. Jacek, would that make it a lot easier to decipher who's speaking to interpretation? Yes, okay, thank you. Minister McKenna, you had the floor. Go ahead.
so about the projects, the infrastructure bank plays a very important role about innovative funding to help projects move ahead. There can be investment by the government. It's really when you look at the project, the role of the infrastructure bank is to help promote the infrastructure. And when you look at the 5 priorities, these are they are very important priorities, even for the Bloc Québécois. Well, yes. But are you talking about the independence of the infrastructure bank at arm's length? Who makes the decisions, you or the infrastructure bank? Because it's supposed to be at arm's length. It's the Government of Canada that sets the priorities. I would be very happy to show you the letter that sets out the priorities. The investment of some $35 billion, that's taxpayer money. As to how to fund the projects, that's up to the infrastructure bank. I gave more leeway so that they could decide on these very important questions. I can't say this is a good project or not. I have no idea. I've worked with the infrastructure bank. It's up to them to decide on the projects. But we do have priorities. We do have a plan, net zero in the coming years, and we want to promote growth, and we want to create jobs for our economy. This is something that can be a part of their role.
We're now going to move on to the NDP. Mr. Bachrach, you have the floor for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome, Minister McKenna. It's good to see you again. Perhaps picking up on this topic of privatization, if a private partner invests in the construction of a project and then is allowed to charge user fees to the Canadian citizens who use that infrastructure, is that not a form of privatization?
Minister?
I mean, there's many ways. First of all, it's very nice to see the member. I know that the member opposite cares greatly about getting good infrastructure built for Canadians and our priorities of creating jobs, tackling climate change, and building more inclusive communities. Look, the whole role of the Canada Infrastructure Bank is to get more infrastructure built. Canadians are paying for infrastructure. We pay for infrastructure through our taxes. Our tax dollars are, we make many investments in infrastructure. The opportunity here with the Canada Infrastructure Bank is to really look at how do we get more built? Because the infrastructure deficit or gap, however you want to call it in our country, is huge. I know that because economists tell us that, but I also know that because if I go to any mayor or any premier, they will tell me their list of infrastructure projects. And we have an opportunity of using workers' dollars. So when you think about the case de dépôt, that's workers, that's Quebec workers' dollars at work to build more infrastructure for Canadians. I would say that that's a good thing, that workers get a return on their investment. This is about their retirement.
But we're not just talking about institutional investors. We're also talking about private investors, which the CIB has tried to target. In the past, the CIB has claimed that it's aiming to provide between 7% and 9% returns to investors. Where do these returns come from, if not from Canadian users of public infrastructure?
Minister?
But as I said, that let's not misunderstand the role of the Canada Infrastructure Bank. It really is there working in partnership with, say, the province of Quebec. They decided they wanted to do the REM. They came up with an arrangement, and the Canada Infrastructure Bank was able to, with innovative financing, play a role in a project that's making a huge difference. You can say the same, Alberta, there's an irrigation project. It's really up to the partners, which in many cases are their provinces that want to work with the Canada Infrastructure Bank in a model that makes sense for the people in their province, which I think is really important. That you have the public sector is really regulating, it's determining the fees, and they're the ones who retain control. This is really about what are the opportunities? Because right now, let's just be clear, Canadian workers' dollars are building infrastructure in Australia. They're building infrastructure across the world. I think we also want to make sure that we're benefiting from those workers' savings, that we're helping. It helps with their retirement. But as I say, it helps with a whole range of other outcomes, including making sure that we build clean power, that we get more public transit
Minister,
built.
you're talking about institutional investors, and Mr. Scheer was talking about the CIB's stated goal of bringing in private investment, and I believe that's where the concern about privatization lies. So if you're shifting away from private investment, then some of those concerns about privatization are probably less concerns. But I'm going to move on. You were quoted in iPolitics in November 2019 as saying your priority is to apply, quote, a climate lens on everything we do, and infrastructure has to be at the top of that list. Do you stand by that priority?
Minister?
I 100% stand by that priority. We have a climate lens that was actually a shout out to my parliamentary secretary who's here, I think Andy Fillmore, who brought in a private members bill. I believe you were there and supported that. Oh no, you were new, so maybe your predecessor supported that, which means that for every project over $10 million or in the green infrastructure stream, there's a climate lens. I've been working hard on that. That is definitely something that is critically important. And we also need to make sure that we look at how do we apply it across the board to every single project, but without creating huge bureaucracy, because many of these are projects through the infrastructure program with provinces and territories and municipalities. Capacity is not huge, so we need to be supporting them, and it is incredibly important, and it's good to see in the United States that they have said that as well.
Mr. Bachrach?
Mr. Chair, Minister, your department's response to my order paper question showed that only 94 of the 962 infrastructure projects your department has funded were subject to the climate lens assessment. So I'm trying to square your statement that the climate lens has to be applied to everything we do, and the fact that only 10% of the projects your department has funded have actually undergone a climate lens assessment. How do you reconcile these two things?
Minister?
Well, so the private members bill, it was about projects that were $10 million and over. So we fund a lot of smaller projects. But as I said, I'm working very hard, and I'm happy to work with the member opposite in a very practical approach, because I agree with you. I agree every single project should undergo climate lens. There is pushback, I will tell you, from certain provinces. And for smaller communities, it is a challenge for them to have the capacity to apply climate lens. So I think we need to be mindful of that. But the reality is, this is the way that we have to go. I agree with you. We have to be net zero by 2050. We need to exceed, our 2030 target, and we have an opportunity because guess what? Buildings can now be built to net zero. Maybe not retrofits can be harder for smaller communities and remote communities, but we have the technology in many cases, and now we need to apply the climate lens, create the right incentives, and move forward to a cleaner future.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you, Mr. Bachrach.
Thank you,
We're now going to move on. We're now going to move on to our second round. We have leading off from the Conservatives. We have Ms. Cusi, followed by Mr. Fillmore for the Liberals, followed by Mr. Barcelo-Duval for the Bloc, and Mr. Bachrach for the NDP. Two top speakers are 5 minutes. Mr. Barcelo-Duval and Mr. Bachrach will be 2.5 minutes each. Ms. Cusi, your floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and hello, Minister. Very nice to see you once again. Minister, I will start where I left off at our last time we got together, and that's with executive compensation. We had the conversation last time that Monsieur Pierre Lavallee, when he departed the Infrastructure Bank in April of 2020, so this was well into the pandemic, he received executive compensation of $600,000 at a time when we were just heading into the worst economic times Canada has ever known. So, of course, I understand his predecessor, Mr. Michael Sabia, departed in October. Can you please inform the committee whether or not Mr. Sabia also received extravagant executive compensation?
Minister?
So let's be clear that Crown corporations work at arm's length from the government, and the rate of remuneration is based on recommendation of the board and approved by the Governing Council. Michael Sabia, who is now serving as Deputy Minister of Finance, was board chair. So I don't know that you get extravagant corporate compensation as chair. It's between $90,000 and $100,000 a year. I will say that we do have a new CEO, and the Canada Infrastructure Bank has been very transparent about the CEO's salary. His base salary range is the total compensation is 40% lower than the previous CEO. And I have high hopes for Mr. Corey as CEO. He comes from Infrastructure Ontario. I think we're at a new stage in the bank. It was very important to me personally to get the bank on track to really deliver, especially now. Because we are in the greatest recession since the Great Depression.
Thank you. Have you had an opportunity to keep in touch with him? Do you have any idea if he's close to completing the plan for the airline sector? Since I'm certain you would have been in good contact with him before, has he communicated that to you at all?
Minister?
He's in a very different role from where I worked with him before.
Okay, I just thought perhaps you were communicating.
I know he is working very hard.
Okay, well, we hope to see a plan
very
soon.
important that we, help support the aviation sector. That's a critical priority of our government. So I can be sure. I haven't talked to him about it, but I can be sure that he is working on it. I do know that the Minister of Finance and other ministers are working extremely hard.
That's a no, Minister. Thank you very much. My second question has to do with a project that you've mentioned several times, and your colleagues actually in the last meeting mentioned as well, the Alberta Irrigation Project. And actually, every time I hear the name of this project, it's like nails on a chalkboard to me, because I'm not certain how you could possibly feel that one infrastructure bank project could replace the entire industry which your government under your helm destroyed, and that's the natural resources sector. And that's with the implementation of C69, C48, the carbon tax. And just yesterday, your government had the opportunity to contribute against that, support the agriculture sector, which you claim you're trying to help with the Alberta irrigation project by supporting C205, and instead you and your government didn't support it. You voted against it. So my question is, how do you possibly feel that a single project for Alberta could resolve the entire destruction of the industry here under your leadership in over the last 5 years?
Minister.
There's so many ways to answer that question. But I first of all, I would just emphasize that this is a project that was extremely important to the government of Alberta.
The Premier would agree with me, Minister, that you were highly responsible for destroying the natural resources sector here. So I'm sure he appreciates this pittance after the rest of our industry, which was destroyed.
You know, I actually would like a second to be able to answer this, because that is absolutely false. Our focus has been on how do we work with all provinces and territories? How do we grow our economy? How do we make investments in infrastructure that make a huge difference, including in your own riding? I could go through all the projects that have happened in your own riding. And also, yes, climate change is real. And so we need to be figuring out how we move to a low carbon future with people of Alberta, with workers of Alberta, with workers in Saskatchewan,
and recovering the economy. And I'm not sure how, having completed 0 projects in 3 years with a budget of $35 billion, you could possibly expect yourself and your government to lead this country out of this pandemic, create jobs, and restart the economy, Minister.
Well, I guess I would like to know, if your government was, if your party was ever in power, would you cut $18 billion like you said you would do in infrastructure projects? Would you kill the Canada Infrastructure Bank? Would you go
it
back
wouldn't destroy
time?
2 entire industries, both airline and natural resources, like yours has, Minister?
And our climate plan. I
Thank you,
Canadians
Chair.
would love to know that.
Thank you, Minister. We're now going to move on to Mr. Fillmore. Mr. Fillmore, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you, Minister, for being with us today. And I just wanted to say thanks also for your words about the climate lens and our continued work to make it better and stronger as we go forward. Thank you for that. But I want to focus on, first of all, your critic, Mr. Scheer, has complained that there aren't enough projects, the projects aren't going fast enough, yet had wanted to cut $18 billion from the infrastructure fund, which would have been about half the budget of the CIB. And then we just heard from Ms. Kuzi some strange sentiments with regard to climate action and how important it is to have a price on carbon in this country and to transition to a low carbon economy. So putting those two things together, I just wonder if you could talk to the committee about why this is the right moment. This moment when we are in a pandemic, when workforce participation is low, when there is a climate crisis, now is the time more than ever to be investing in infrastructure that is green and smart and helps us to transition to a low carbon economy, rather than hobbling it by budget cuts, if you could. Thank you.
Minister.
Well, I think that's a really important point. So I'm someone who cares greatly about taxpayer dollars, and I believe that every dollar that we invest has to get multiple outcomes. What does it have to get, especially right now when we're in an economic crisis, the greatest crisis since the Great Depression? We need jobs. We've committed as a government to creating 1 million jobs. We need growth. We need also more inclusive communities. We need to have better infrastructure, and by that, by inclusive, I don't just mean Indigenous communities, racialized communities. I also mean in rural areas where they need good infrastructure. 3, we need to make sure that we're tackling climate change, because climate change is real. But also, I just think that this idea that tackling climate change is negative for the economy. We just have to look at the economy down south. The United States is going big on taking action on climate change because that's where the opportunities are. That's where the growth is. That's where the jobs are. So that's what we need to be doing. It is worrying, though, to think that if you had a conservative government, that they would cut infrastructure dollars. That this is absolutely the wrong time to do that. That we need to be investing in infrastructure. And if you look at what we've done since the pandemic hit in March, every single week, my department has to bear with me. I go through every single project that we are reviewing. We've approved 1,864 projects worth $2.85 billion since last March. And do you know how many projects that the Conservative government approved during their 4-year majority? 975 projects. So in 1 year, in the middle of a pandemic, during a minority government, we've approved 1,864 projects, while the previous Conservative government in 4 years only approved 975 projects. And those are projects across the country. Those are projects in Conservative ridings, in Bloc ridings, in NDP ridings, in Liberal ridings. Those are projects in rural communities and urban communities. Those are projects that are helping create good jobs, that are growing their economy, that are tackling climate change, and that are improving the quality of life for Canadians. And that's what we want to do. And in a recession, the greatest recession since the Great Depression, with a climate crisis, we need to be building back better. And that is what we are going to continue to do. That is what I'm going to continue to do every day. And we're going to be working with the Canada Infrastructure Bank, looking at leveraging private sector investment to get more and better infrastructure built. And I think we will look back at this time and say the pandemic was terrible. But guess what? We managed to make transformational, once in a generation difference in building infrastructure that is making a huge difference in the lives of Canadians, in our prosperity, in our competitiveness, and also in tackling climate change.
Summer?
Is there a few minutes left? How are we
you got about 40 seconds left.
Okay, just quickly then, you mentioned Indigenous projects, Minister. Thank you for that. You recently wrote to the chair of the board of the CIB requesting that CIB invest at least $1 billion in projects that benefit Indigenous peoples. Can you just, in the few seconds that are left, just tell us what kind of projects we were thinking about there and how it would benefit Indigenous communities?
I'm just going to focus on one example, the Anita Energy Storage Project. That is with the First Nations community. You know what? We have a huge infrastructure gap with Indigenous peoples, but they also want to be part of building projects. They want to be part of growth and creating jobs. And we have a huge opportunity to work with them. And I think this was extremely important that we create a clear priority, a clear focus for the bank to invest $1 billion in partnership with Indigenous peoples, whether that is in clean power or that is in clean water. There's a whole range of opportunities and projects that are waiting to be there. And this is on direct feedback that I've had from First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister. And thank you, Mr. Fillmore. We're now going to move on for 5 minutes. The Conservatives, Mr. Scheer, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I just want to respond to a couple of pieces of misinformation that some members on the committee have put out. First of all, when the Liberals try to make accusations about what our party was promising in the last election, it's important to keep in mind that 40% of the infrastructure dollars that were allocated in the first couple of years, 2017 and 2018, under your government, Minister, lapsed. So that means it never got spent, never got out the door. Your department's own internal audits have raised massive red flags in several areas. The Auditor General is currently investigating the infrastructure plan that your government's been rolling out. So the second thing I want to address is this idea that large projects take time. And of course, you're right, Minister. There's no argument there. There's no argument that it takes more than just a few days or a couple of weeks to get a large infrastructure project built. But surely to goodness you can agree that in 4 years, the bank should have something to show for it. The previous CEO was paid a bonus, which usually under Treasury Board guidelines is reserved for exceeding expectations. So I don't know what you were expecting the infrastructure bank to deliver, but since 0 projects were completed and former CEO received the bonus for that, you must have been expecting even less than that. When we go back and look at the P3 fund that the previous Conservative government had to do exactly what it is that you're talking about, to unleash private sector investment, I can go over a long list of projects that were completed in a short period of time. A water and wastewater plant in Kananaskis country, which was announced in 2012, completed in 2014. In your hometown of Hamilton, the Hamilton Biosolids project, which was announced in 2017 and was operational in 2020. In my hometown of Regina, a large bypass and overpass project, which was put out for tender in 2014 and construction work began in 2015. The first phase was done in 2017, and the project was completed by 2019. The Iqaluit Airport,
excuse me, Mr. Chair. Mr. Brasseau-Duval, do you have a point of order?
Oui, Monsieur.
Yes, Chair, I do. I want to be sure that we're not making a mistake about the order of speakers here and questioners. Perhaps I'm mistaken, but could you verify?
No, it's correct. In the second round, we had Ms. Kusi, Mr. Fillmore. I'm sorry. I do apologize. I skipped over to you and Backrack and went right to Mr. Scheer. My apologies. After Mr. Scheer is done, I will go back to you, Mr. Brasseau-Duval, and Mr. Backrack. Once again, my apologies. Mr. Scheer, go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And so, as you've heard, I've outlined several large-scale projects. I mean, these are the types of projects that actually do provide a great deal of economic spin-off. There's all kinds of benefits. There's private sector involvement in these projects, and the old P3 fund, which your government eliminated and replaced it with the Canadian Infrastructure Bank. The old P3 fund was able to actually deliver on this. So you must have concluded that something was wrong with the P3 plan. You came up with your own system. And in that system, in this Canadian Infrastructure Bank, you have made all kinds of claims about 2 times, 7 times, even I think one of your officials claimed at one point 11 times the investment. So for every dollar that you put in for taxpayers' money, you would get $11 back from the private sector. So far, the only example of private sector you've been able to point to is from the Réseau in Montreal, a project which was already greenlit, which was already going to get federal government funding, that the Canadian Infrastructure Bank just replaced traditional funding programs with that. Do you have any other examples of all the projects that are being listed where the private sector has invested, where you've been able to leverage that? And is your threshold for success for the Canadian Infrastructure Bank still the 2 times, 4 times, or 7 times multiplier for private investment for every dollar of taxpayer?
Minister?
Well, I just want to start by reminding everyone that we wouldn't be getting new infrastructure built under a Conservative government because it wanted to cut $18 billion to
That's just false. We have the same amount of overall.
That's just a campaign promise. I don't know, but and
well,
also
you've delivered
Canada
on none of your promises.
Bank, I've heard many times the Canada Infrastructure Bank would be killed by Conservatives. That is coming from Conservatives. Look, I could go through some of the things that you said. My helpful officials have noted that the Regina project that you were talking about took 2 years of development, of planning. That's what happens for major projects. But
it's completed.
I also am looking to see projects going ahead. I've been very clear to the new CEO of the bank, to the new chair of the bank. They also have a growth plan that is intended to get to work over the next 3 years for smaller projects that are going to create jobs.
Can you just give us a number?
Mr. Scheer,
I will.
Mr. Scheer,
Just
Minister
one
has the
second.
floor. Minister,
Just
go ahead.
Thank you. I would like to say that my measures for success is that we get more and better infrastructure built for Canadians. When you talk about the 1,864 projects that we approved in the past year, we're $2.85 billion.
So we're talking about the infrastructure bank.
I'm talking about any infrastructure projects.
Well,
what are we looking for when we make investments in infrastructure? We want to get more and better infrastructure built. We want to stretch the dollars by, yes, bringing in the private sector, but when you go to communities across the country, it's going to depend by projects. That is something
thank you,
the Canada Infrastructure Bank is going to look at good opportunities. But what is most important for Canadians that are watching this is about more infrastructure for you.
You've got zero completed.
Better infrastructure.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank
you, Mr. Chair. We're going to move on to the next
I think
speaker.
we should go on a little trip. We can do a site visit when it is safe.
Thank you, Minister McKenna. Thank you, Mr. Scheer. We're now going to move on to Mr. Brasseau-Duval. Mr. Brasseau-Duval, you have the floor for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair. Earlier, we finished our exchange talking about the infrastructure fund and the government. I mentioned that I find it surprising there was a subsidy that was given to the REM, and somewhere along the way there was a government decision that was taken. that the infrastructure bank was going to take away the subsidy. I don't know. Mr. Sabia, who was there at the bank and is now at finance, it seems that he's in close contact with the government. I might suggest that the announcement of a subsidy was made, and at the time it was said that there might perhaps be money there within the finishing of the REM project for the Montreal airport. Now, is that still a possibility? About a year and a half ago, you announced that there would be $55 million for an in-depth review of the project. Since that time, your government has been very silent about the infrastructure. Do you think that you are going to be hiding behind infrastructure so as not and also the arm's length of the banks so as not to go on to this project? The independence of the infrastructure bank is very important. But as I said, I put down a letter to state what our priorities were for the infrastructure bank. There was $1 billion in partnership with other partners. But of course, we work together. That's how it has to operate. Yeah, but I'm talking about the high-frequency via rail train. There is a study that is being done. It would be a major investment, a very large one. And with investments of that size, we have to be very aware of what would happen. We have to be aware of the technology, how it would be funded. These are questions that are really important. And as I said, I certainly understand you're not making any commitment. I want to be clear.
Thank you, Minister. We're now going to move on for 2.5 minutes to the NDP. Mr. Bachrach, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister, the CIB's corporate plan states that, quote, the success of the growth plan will be demonstrated through broad-based outcomes such as a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. Will the projects funded by the Canada Infrastructure Bank be subject to your climate lens assessment?
Minister.
Well, thank you very much. That's actually a very good point. I mean, look, we're looking very closely. The plan that they have put out, we have said it has to have clear outcomes. Everyone in life has to have outcomes. So climate is an
Minister,
outcome.
like with all due respect, and I have a huge amount of respect for your work, but it's a really simple question. There's a tool called the Climate Lens that your government has put in place. There's the Canada Infrastructure Bank that has infrastructure projects. Are those projects subject to the Climate Lens methodology and assessment?
Minister?
I believe they should be held to a higher standard.
Are they currently?
Well, we are working with the bank because they need to demonstrate how we are going to get emission reductions because they have to contribute to our climate plan like anyone else. It's different, though, and I think this is important because I know that you care greatly about this. I mean, what you are doing for one project, so if you're building a project, for example, in northern BC that's a community center and a climate lens and what would be appropriate versus a climate lens on, say, they're doing a zero emission bus, they're making investments in zero emission buses. So that's a program. I think those are different things. But
the problem, Minister, is that
Mr. Bachrach, go ahead.
No assessment is taking place. Like you've promised that there's going to be this action on greenhouse gas emissions and climate, and you've praised the US for going big on tackling climate change, but I'm not convinced that your government is. Here we've got only 10% of the projects that your department funds are subject to the climate lens assessment. None of the projects funded by the Canada Infrastructure Bank are assessed. It almost feels like the climate goals are just something that is a throwaway line on the first page, and there's no accountability. How can you assure Canadians that the $180 billion you're going to spend on infrastructure between now and 2030 isn't going to actually increase climate pollution?
Minister?
So we've built into the expectations for the Canada Infrastructure Bank the GHG impacts. that we need to see the reductions in emissions. And if you even look at the categories that we've created, clean power, public transit, all of the across the board, we're looking at investments in programs that are going to make a real difference in reducing emissions, and we need to quantify them. That is what the climate lens is right now, but it's more than that. They need to drive emission reductions. So that's a critical part of this. There is a process, including through Treasury Board, to get the information, and that is the expectation that they have.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister. And thank you, Mr. Bachrach. We're now going to move on to the last set of questions of the second round. Mr. Rogers, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Welcome, Minister and officials. Minister, when I was a former mayor and a member of the Municipal Association, president for the province of Newfoundland and Labrador, and a board of directors member of FCM for 4 years, we often debated and called on the federal government for investments of this magnitude in infrastructure. And we didn't get a whole lot of support from the previous Conservative government. And I know the FCM put a major effort in and are delighted with the support that they've gotten from our government since 2015. Minister, access to high-speed internet, particularly in rural Canada, is crucially important, and it's been really come to the fore during this COVID-19 period. That has forced people to work from home, of course, and to do schooling and virtual medicine and a whole bunch of stuff. So the CIB has identified broadband as a priority investment area. And I was going to address this critical shortfall. So I'd just like for you to comment on that for me, please.
Mister?
Well, thank you very much to the member. And I know as a former mayor, you know how important infrastructure is to the quality of life. And I think certainly right now, if not the top priority, one of the absolute top priorities in terms of infrastructure investments has to be in broadband. It's not just a productivity issue, it's an equity issue. And that's why, I mean, our government is making historic investments in broadband. And that's part of the infrastructure program that I'm responsible for. But the Canada Infrastructure Bank identified it as a key priority. So this is one of the priorities that's set out for investment in the next 3 years, $2 billion for large-scale broadband projects. So we really need large-scale projects because we need to connect a lot of people to high-speed broadband. And they have a longer-term goal. It's $3 billion for unserved and underserved communities. I know they're working with our government to identify opportunities as well as with other governments because I think that's a real opportunity. It's all hands on deck when it comes to broadband, and we need to accelerate quickly. We've said that we want to have all Canadians connected to broadband, and I think we need to do that as fast as possible.
Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Mr. Chair, if it's okay, I wanted to give Mr. Alcori time remaining to ask a question.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. Mr. Alcori, the floor is yours. You have about 2.5 minutes.
Monsieur le Président. Thank you, Chair, and welcome to our Minister and our guests. Madam Minister, there is something so important for Quebecers here concerning with the rail project. I would like to have a detailed illustration from you about this. We have heard from the Conservatives a great deal of criticism about the infrastructure bank. They say it does nothing. That's astonishing to me because in my riding in Montreal, the rail transport system is very important, and it is been contributed to by the bank. It creates jobs. I hope that you can say a few words to us about the importance of the CIB in the REM project and explain how the Conservatives are not presenting it correctly. Thank you to my colleague. It's not only the Conservatives, I think the Bloc as well are asking questions like, is this a good project or not? But when I talk to the people from Montreal and the people in Quebec, generally, they say it's so important. It is the most important project, the biggest project for the Montreal area. They'd like to see the expansion of the REM. And it's really important. I'll give you figures. I like figures. It's an investment of $1.3 billion by the CIB, but 26 communities will have the opportunity of being able to take the REM 67 kilometers long. This is one huge project. And with respect to the reduction of GHGs, because that's something that's very important for me and also for our government, 680,000 tons reduction. And as I said, job creation, 34,000 jobs created. So this is something that when you have the infrastructure bank working with the provinces, with the city of Montreal, and with the people in the area, that leads to something very important. It's not just figures. Just imagine going to work. You're not going to be clogged up in congested Montreal traffic. You'll be on the REM, and you will be able to get to work and home to your children quickly.
And thank you, Mr. Rogers, and thank you, Mr. Alcuri. We're now going to move into our second hour. We have speakers from the Conservative Party, Mr. Scheer for 5 minutes, Mr. Alcuri for 5 minutes, followed by Mr. Barceau-Duval for 2.5 minutes, 2.5 minutes for Mr. Bachrach, 5 minutes to Mr. Shipley of the Conservatives, and finishing off with Mr. Sadu of the Liberal Party for once again for 5 minutes. So we're now going to start off with Mr. Scheer. Now, Ms. McKenna, I understand that you have to move on to another appointment. So thank you very much for your participation today and your interventions. We truly appreciate it. Well done.
I appreciate all your work. Thanks very much to everyone. Bye.
Thank you. So with that, we're going to start off with Mr. Scheer. Mr. Scheer, you have the floor for five minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I think I'll just take a few seconds just to highlight something that the minister said. She said the whole point of the Canadian Infrastructure Bank was to get more infrastructure built. And so far it's completed 0 projects. And when you compare that to the Conservative P3 fund, which actually successfully delivered on projects, we were able to see the completion of 25 large-scale infrastructure projects in about 7.5 to 8 years, depending on how you calculate. And so if the Canadian Infrastructure Bank is going to try to get more than that, then they're off to a very, very poor start. So maybe the officials can help us out with some of the questions that the minister didn't want to answer. I'm hoping someone there could tell me, you could round it to the nearest $100 million. The minister pointed to the Réseau project in Montreal. Fine. We all know that was an existing project that would have been funded through other formulas, other envelopes of spending. So the Canadian Infrastructure Bank did not unlock anything because those commitments are already made. So other than the Réseau project, rounded to the nearest $100 million, can someone tell me how much private sector investment the Canadian Infrastructure Bank has secured so far?
Who would like to take that one?
Thank you, Chair. Kelly Gillis. So as the minister had mentioned, in the REM project with CDPQ, there has been a commitment of $3 billion in that particular project coming in from the Quebec pension plan. And in a number of other projects that are underway right now, the private CIB is in discussion with private partners for investments. And the follow-up question with the CIB, I believe the CIB officials are coming in a couple of weeks. So I think a further discussion with them on the outlook for private investment would be completely appropriate. And I would just like to correct some of the facts on P3 Canada. So P3 Canada was actually devolved into Infrastructure Canada. So we are overseeing the 25 P3 agreements. 4 of them have not reached completion, and 2 of them will be reach completion this year. So infrastructure does take time to complete, and they are ongoing, and they are very good projects.
I'm sure I'm sure we can both agree that yes, some may take several years, some may take 4, some may take 2, some may take 8. But surely you would agree with me that some of the projects under the old P3 Canada Fund from start to finish took less than 4 years. Would you agree with that?
I would have to confirm the facts on those particular timelines because I know a number of them started, such as the one in Regina in 2013, and had 2 years of planning before it actually moved into the P3 fund for commitment and then completion.
Right. But as I mentioned, there's several projects here that were from start to finish took fewer than 4 years. So I can confirm that for you. I can save you the work there. But I just want to be clear, and the Montreal project aside, because I'm not really sure that it's fair to include the Montreal project in what the Canadian Infrastructure Bank has been able to unleash. That was a project that was already greenlit. That was already a project that had already been committed to. The case's involvement was already arranged, and basically the Canadian Infrastructure Bank just displaced federal dollars that would have come through other channels. The reason why this is important is because this particular study is about the bank itself. This isn't the Auditor General is doing an investigation into the mismanagement in other infrastructure envelopes. This study is narrowly focused on the Canadian Infrastructure Bank. This government took $35 billion worth of tax dollars, told us all that with that $35 billion, they would get back at least 70, maybe even 105 billion. And depending on some of the on which day and how excited some of the officials were, we were told it was 11 times that. So we might get back over $380 billion worth of private sector investment. So I just want to clarify one more time. I'm sure that the CIB reports to the minister. It's been in operation for 4 years. Rounded to the nearest 100 million. If you take the Montreal project aside, how much private sector investment has this $35 billion resulted in?
Ms. Gillis?
So Chair, thank you for the question. As I said right now, CDPQ, when they were involved in the negotiations, they actually were involved for several months and restructured that particular transaction to be able to add value to it. That is a $3 billion commitment. And for further discussions on closes and discussions with the private sector on what the outlook is for investment, I think that would be an appropriate conversation with the CIB when they come before you in a couple of weeks from now.
Okay, so the answer is you still can't give me a number for anything outside of Montreal. So we will absolutely ask that officials. I'd hope that maybe the minister's officials also would have known what was going on with Canadian Infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Scheer.
But fair enough.
Thank you, and thank you, Ms. Gillis. We're now going to move on to Mr. Alcuri. Mr. Alcuri, you get the floor for 5 minutes. You're on mute, Vassell. There you go.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. My first question is to Ms. Gillis. The minister has made a new statement about the priorities and the responsibilities of the CIB. She gave the Infrastructure Bank the government's directives with respect to priorities in investing. I can understand that the board of directors of the bank is ultimately responsible for making specific investment decisions. Can you give us the main changes that have been tagged as priorities?
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you very much. Yes, the changes are important for the priorities in the Infrastructure Bank. You have to look at how they will be dealing with the Indigenous interests for $1 billion. Also, working in the area of high-speed broadband and
it's happening for others, but I'm getting the French and the translation at the same volume. And I tried
over here too.
I tried muting my original audio, which has worked before, and it didn't work this time. So my apologies, Ms. Gillis, for interrupting.
Sorry, Ms. Gillis. If the clerk can check into that, I'd appreciate it. Ms. Gillis, go ahead. We'll be fine. Go ahead.
Merci.
Yes, thank you. And you want to look at the priority areas like connectivity, high speed, and also
translation. Okay, translators. Are we all right?
Clean power in French.
How are we making out? Okay, let's try this one more time. Ms. Gillis, continue.
D'abord, les priorités.
With respect to the priorities, $1 billion in incentives in the area of Aboriginal interests, and also to work in areas where
the translation, we're getting both the English, we're hearing Ms. Gillis loud and clear, but we're also hearing translation loud and clear. So both are sort of muffling out the other. I'm not sure what you can do on your end, but we'll take maybe 30 seconds to see if you can fix that, and we'll continue on with Ms. Gillis. Mr. Alcuri, I stopped your time, so you're good.
No problem.
If I speak in English, would that help?
It's still going to be a problem.
It's still going to be a problem.
Okay. You can be sort of our tester. So when others speak in French, we can have the problem resolved.
Okay. So.
Okay, Ms. Gillis, I'm going to let you go again. Let's see what happens. Ms. Gillis, go ahead.
Okay. D'abord.
First of all, as to the priorities for changes, the board of directors
speaking in English, and then if the interpreters can resolve that problem in the meantime, it'd be appreciated. I'm just trying to respect time. So Ms. Gillis, go ahead.
Okay. So thank you very much. And so in the letter of the statement of priorities and accountabilities, the main focus areas were on the priority areas for investment. So a continuation of trade and transportation, transit in green, but more specificity on allowing for connectivity, given the urgency today for connectivity and a high-speed broadband internet in rural and remote communities, as well as $1 billion investment in Indigenous communities. And lastly, I'll just mention, as the Minister mentioned, the National Infrastructure Assessment and the importance of doing an evidence-based understanding of what is important, what are the gaps, how do we address them, and how do we prioritize. And so for the Canada Infrastructure Bank to be able to support us where their model makes sense in what those opportunities could be. So that would be some of the key areas that the Minister outlined in her letter to the Board of Directors.
Mr. Alcuri?
Yes.
My second question is to Mr. Campbell. Canada is one of the largest investors in infrastructure in the world. In the present form of public funds, but also with respect to investments that Canada makes overall, in view of the fact that the return is there to allow for an appropriate retirement for hundreds of thousands of Canadians. Would it not be better to invest in more Canadian projects? We have seen success with the Infrastructure Bank working with the largest fund in Quebec to promote the REM project in Montreal. What do you think that the bank should do to attract more interest in investing in pension funds in Canada too?
Solving that problem, it seems to be resolved now. So Ms. Gillis, you can proceed in français.
Thank you for the question. Thank you, sir. I think that the creation of the bank is one of the tools that allows for competition for Canada in infrastructure investment. First of all, when you look at the priorities in the areas of investment that are aligned with government interests, it opens up opportunities for investment in Canada for pensions and for institutional investors, for them to come here and to invest. One of the roles of the CIB is to advise the provinces, the territories, communities and municipalities to see what projects are there to provide appropriate opportunities in addition to traditional tools.
Thank you, Mr. Arcuri. Ms. Gillis, quick question. On the bottom icon, do you have it turned to français on your bottom when you're talking French?
No, I have it. Right now it's in English. So if I turn it to French, would that fix the problem? And I'm sorry.
When you speak French, if you can just switch it over to French, I think that'll fix the problem.
I'm sorry. I will do that.
And I'll thank Mr. Sidhu for throwing that that at me. Thanks, Manny. We're now going to move on to Mr. Brassou-Duval. Mr. Brassou-Duval, you got the floor for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair. Ms. Gillis, for some months now, the headlines have been that the REM station at the old port in Montreal would be compromised because the federal government is refusing to put out the money that it should. The Quebec government has already committed a great deal of money to that project. They've got a lot of money in it. I want to know from you, do you know if this issue is going to be settled? Thank you for your question, Mr. Chair. With the changes and with the reports, the situation has changed, but the discussion is underway right now, and that's all I can tell you right now. But discussions are underway. Do you have an idea how long it'll be before the discussions are concluded? I don't have a specific date, no. You know that the tunnel is being drilled out right now, so hopefully it'll be sooner rather than later. All I can say is that everybody's aware of the issue and discussions are underway. Well, thank you. Chair, if you allow me, I had the opportunity to table routine motions that I would have brought up earlier, but I was questioning the minister. I would like to take the opportunity now to table my 3 motions now. Can I deal with them now?
Que le greffier informe
that the clerk inform each witness who is to appear before the committee that the House Administration support team must conduct technical tests to check the connectivity and the equipment used to ensure the best possible sound quality, and that the chair advises the committee at the start of each meeting of any witness who did not perform the required technical test.
Just a question to you. As these motions are all very similar, I'm assuming, Mr. Brassou-Duval, you're actually going to present the 3 motions that are very similar?
Yes, I could present them right now quite quickly, if you like, and that would be better.
Why don't we do it that way? That would be more time friendly. So if you can present all 3 motions, and then what I'll do is I'll ask for a vote on all 3, of course separately, but you'll have already put them on the floor.
Excellent.
Mr. Brassou-Duval, go ahead.
Excellent. The next motion is that all documents submitted for committee business that do not come from a federal department or that have not been translated by the Translation Bureau be sent for prior linguistic review by the Translation Bureau before being distributed to members. That's my second motion. And my third motion is this, that the text of any substantive motion or any motion in amendment of a substantive motion be distributed in writing in both official languages to all committee members before the committee begins debate on such a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Brassou-Duval, Missy. We're now going to move on to all 3 motions. I am going to do them separately. Are there any questions or comments on the motions? Mr. Bachrach, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to my colleague for bringing these forward. I agree with him that having adequate translation is an important component of our work. I'm a little bit concerned about the third one, which is, that all motions and all amendments to motions need to be translated. I'm just wondering about the practicality of that. Occasionally there may be motions arising that are perhaps less substantive, but that come up over the course of our deliberations. And I perhaps a question through to Mr. Barcelou-Duval, if he feels that there are some motions that are more routine in nature or less substantive that could be made without translation.
So I'm going to go to Mr. Barcelou-Duval. I see Ms. Jessica has her hand up, and after Mr. Barcelou-Duval, I'm going to go to the clerk, so the clerk can give us an update on some of the comments or some of the substance attached to what Mr. Barcelou-Duval is actually asking for. Mr. Barcelou-Duval, you have the floor.
Yes, I understand that Mr. Bachrach is raising the point that when we are debating amongst ourselves or when we discuss matters, there are motions that can arise or amendments that can arise directly on the floor during the course of our debate. That it would certainly slow down the work of the committee if we proceeded in this. That's not the intent, of course. It is just to ensure that everybody understands a motion before it is moved. Unfortunately, if we don't have adequate translation, we might have a misunderstanding on the part of any member. And so that was the intent of my motion.
So before I ask for further questions on each motion, I'm going to ask the clerk to give us an update on some of the efforts that the House of Commons is currently involved in that may attach to the three motions. Mr. Clerk?
Okay, well, beginning with the testing of witnesses and the use of headsets and whatnot, our current practice is that all witnesses are tested before appearing at committee. And we make every effort to make sure that every witness is provided with a headset. It's not always possible to get a witness a headset in time, so we do have express delivery of those headsets, and the House makes every effort to, we can, if they're in a major metropolitan area, we can get it to them the next morning. So on that set, for when dealing with the testing of witnesses, that is, I mean, if the committee would like to codify it as practice, that's great. We're already doing it, just to reassure all members that that is indeed the case. For the other motions, as Mr. Bachrach raised an issue when it comes to amendments from the floor, my concern, just administratively here and trying to support the committee, is that who would be doing this translation service? It's not actually a function of the interpreters in the room, because some motions, particularly when you start to deal with bills or whatnot, cannot just be done with a straight translation. They actually have specialized translators that work on those documents. So for some things, and certainly it's not the role of the clerk. The clerk would not be translating documents at committee. We are not certified translators. So that being said, those are just some administrative concerns. For motions, the committee does have a routine motion that all documents, of course, are to be distributed only by the clerk and only when they're available in both official languages, and one would expect that that does occur pretty much in 100% of the cases that I can think of here in committee. I'm trying to think of any other pertinent information. Oh, the Translation Bureau. There's an issue with that as well. Sometimes we have stakeholder groups or whatnot provide us with translated briefs. Maybe they're already posted up on their website. These could be publications that the stakeholder group has already put out there in both languages. Sometimes these are copyrighted, and to have those then sent to the Translation Bureau might be a little bit problematic, but of course, if the committee wants us to do that, we can do that.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. So what I'm going to do now, folks, is I'm going to go to each motion. And I know Ms. Jasek and I think it was Mr. Soroka had their hands up for questions. So I'm going to go first off to motion number one. Are there any questions on motion number one? With none, oh, Mr. Cram, go ahead.
So, Mr. Chair, which motion is motion number 1? Is that the sound check for witnesses, or is that the linguistic?
Why did you have to ask me that? Okay. Mr. Clerk, can you read out motion number 1 quickly, please?
I think it was just the Mr. Cram's point was just which of the 3 motions would we designate as motion number 1?
Yes. So go with the first one that Mr. Barcelona presented to the floor.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I believe the first motion related to the testing of the technical check and,
right.
the headsets.
Mr. Clerk, if you can read that motion out.
Sure. That the clerk inform each witness who is to appear before the committee that the House Administration Support Team must conduct technical tests to check the connectivity and the equipment used to ensure the best possible sound quality, and that the chair advises and that the chair advises the committee at the start of each meeting of any witnesses who did not perform the required technical tests.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Mr. Cram? That's fine. Mr. Soroka?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Soroka, you had a question on that?
Well, my question is for the most part, we've been pretty good with sound quality, but it's coming to the interpretation services, like as Ms. Gillis had put forward. Can we also check that at the same time? Because I don't know if the interpreters are on at the same time you're doing the voice checking, if they could have to alternate between the two.
Okay. Mr. Clerk, any comment on that?
It's my understanding that the sound quality is checked as part of the process for checking the witnesses' connectivity and sound quality.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Jacek, do you have a question on motion number 1?
It was simply very much along the same lines as Mr. Soroka. Can we ensure that any testing does ensure that the witness understands exactly how to use the interpretation piece as part of the sound check as well?
Okay. Okay, good. Any further questions on motion number 1? With none, Mr. Clerk, if you want to call the vote.
Mr. Fillmore.
You're on mute, Andy.
Well, I'm afraid I didn't hear the question, Chair.
Mr. Clerk, if you want to repeat the question, please.
Yes, so again, this is the motion with regard to the testing of witnesses before they appear at committee. Would you like me to read the entire motion again, or?
No, thank you. Thank you. I just need to know which one it was. In favor, please. Thank you for the clarification.
Monsieur El Khoury.
In favor.
Ms. Jacek.
Yes.
Mr. Rogers. Mr. Rogers. Yes. Oh,
Put your boom down. Put your boom down.
I'm sorry. I apologize, Mr. Clerk. Yes.
Mr. Sidhu.
Yes.
Mr. Cram.
In favor.
Ms. Kusi.
In favor.
Mr. Shipley.
In favor.
Mr. Soroka.
In favor.
Monsieur Barcelou-Duval.
À faveur.
And Mr. Backrack.
In favor as well.
Thank you. Mr. Clerk, if you can read the second motion.
Okay, we'll go with the translation motion. That all documents submitted for committee business that do not come from a federal department or that have not been translated by the Translation Bureau be sent for prior linguistic review by the Translation Bureau before being distributed to members.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Start the vote, please.
Mr. Fillmore.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Ms. Kusi. I'm sorry. I should have asked for any questions. Ms. Kusi, go ahead.
Pardon me. Yes, I wanted to make an amendment to the motion, please.
Okay, the amendment.
The amendment is, one moment, please. Mr. Chair, and Mr. Clerk, we would like to add members' offices after the words members' offices after federal department. Chair, pardon me for the delay.
Okay, are there any questions or comments on the amendment? I think just in respecting time, I'll ask the mover if you'd be happy with just making that a friendly amendment. Mr. Barceau-Duval?
Oui, c'est correct.
Yes, no problem.
Thank you. So to the amended motion, any questions or comments? Okay, Mr. Clerk, if you want to call the vote.
Yeah, and just for the amendment there, I'm going to take that as committee's consent, that was
Correct.
just adopted by unanimous consent,
Correct.
Just to keep it straight in my head. Okay, Mr. Fillmore.
In favor, please.
Monsieur El Khoury.
En faveur.
In favor.
Hasek.
Yes.
Mr. Rogers.
Yes.
Mr. Sidhu.
In favor.
Mr. Cram.
In favor.
Ms. Kusi.
In favor.
Mr. Shipley.
In favor.
Mr. Soroka.
In favor.
Mr. Barceau-Duval.
Oh.
Correct.
In favor.
11
Thank you,
yeas.
members. Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Now we're going to go on to the last motion. Are there any questions or comments to the last motion? Mr. Clerk, did you want to read it out quickly so we members have an understanding of what they're voting on?
That the text of any substantive motion or any motion in amendment of a substantive motion be distributed in writing in both official languages to all committee members before the committee begins debate on such a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Questions or comments? Mr. Soroka, go ahead.
So how does this affect if there's a motion being put forward at the table at the meeting? How do we deal with that?
Mr. Clerk?
I would suggest it would be
Mr.
Barceau-Duval to explain.
Mr. Barceau-Duval, do you want to add some clarity to that?
Well, I would say, according to my interpretation, any motion to amend should be in both official languages. Well, perhaps I understand that people do have some caveats about this for the moment because there are some emotions to amend that could arise on the floor in the context of a discussion. I wouldn't be in opposition. Would this require an amendment to the motion on the table? I'm not capable of saying, but if it's your opinion, I would be quite willing to hear an amendment.
Mr. Soroka?
Well, I think that's maybe an option because if you don't have that ability to make make a motion on the floor without interpretation, that's going to really stifle the committee. So I would like to do an amendment then that this would also include or would not be regulated if there was a motion from the floor.
A motion in terms of an amendment.
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Barceau-Duval? You're good? Do I have consent of the committee to add that in as a part of the motion? No problem. Mr. Bachrach, go ahead.
I believe if you simply take out that one clause from the original motion, it would achieve the same effect, which is, currently it reads any substantive motion or any amendment to a substantive motion. If you just took out the words any amendment to a substantive motion, it would essentially say any substantive motion that comes before the committee has to be translated. And I think that reflects our conversation.
Thank you, Mr. Bachrach. Mr. Clerk?
Yeah, so if you just want my interpretation on what the rule would then cover off, and I hope that this is Mr. Barcelou-Duval's understanding as well, if we remove the text as Mr. Bachrach suggested, or any motion and amendment of a substantive motion, this would still then cover if, say, the committee was in a portion of committee business and a member brought forward a motion that perhaps had not had the 48 hours notice and had not been distributed beforehand. Any such motion that comes off the floor in that manner would have to be made in both official languages.
Mr. Barcelou-Duval?
I don't think I really understood the interpretation of the clerk. What you're mentioning is that any motion that was not subject to a 48-hour notice would have to be distributed in both French and English. This is what I understand. Is that the intent of what the clerk has said? But if that's the case, well, I'm okay. Well, if you want to bring in a motion, you have to have it ready in both official languages, and the amendments would be brought up on the floor.
Essentially, what I'm hearing from Mr. Bachrach and the clerk is that your text or the text of this motion would read that the text of any substantive motion be distributed in writing in both official languages to all committee members before the committee begins debate on such a motion. Is that what you're looking for, Mr. Barcelou-Duval?
Je suis correct avec.
I'm okay with that.
Mr. Bachrach, any further questions? No? Any further questions from members of the committee? With that, we'll go to the vote. Mr. Clerk?
So just again, once again, so it's clear for me, so that amendment of Mr. Bachrach has been accepted to remove that language?
Yes, we have committee consent to accept, and Mr. Barcelou-Duval's acceptance that, and did you want me to read it again, Michael?
No, I believe I understand where we're at, and I'll just put the vote to the committee then.
Good, thank you, Mike.
So, Mr. Fillmore.
En faveur.
Monsieur El Khoury.
En faveur.
Ms. Jasek.
En faveur.
Mr. Rogers.
In favor.
Mr. Sidhu.
In favor.
Mr. Cram.
In favor.
Ms. Kusi.
In favor.
Mr. Shipley.
In favor.
Mr. Soroka.
In favor.
Monsieur Barcelou-Duval.
Oh.
And Mr. Bachrach.
In favor.
Once again, 11 yeas, 0 nays.
Thank you. Thank you, members. Thank you, Mr. Clerk. And thank you to the mover, Mr. Barcelou-Duval. We now move on back to the speaker, Mr. El Khoury. You still have the floor, and you have about 4 minutes left.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just come back to this with respect to, I am coming back to REM. This is a major vital project, and it's so important for all Quebecers and for several communities and several adjacent municipalities. I'd like to know if our guests can explain this. It's so important for the citizens to know that there is a green economy that is paired with a green infrastructure that will protect a green environment. Can you explain how you see this? How will you lead this project so that the citizens feel that the environment is being protected and it will conserve our quality of life in that area? What lens are you going to apply?
Ms. Gillis, go ahead. You're on mute. Ms. Gillis, you're on mute.
Thank you so much for the question, Chair. For important projects like that, there are many priorities for the bank, and one of them is to have green areas. Public transit has many benefits for protecting the environment and reducing emissions. The CIB does communicate its commitments for reducing emissions and for looking at what can be done in these areas that would have a very significant impact. They want to be transparent about the impacts. And another priority is clean power for the areas of transmission. These projects will be looked at very clearly in terms of the priorities because they also have a very important implication in terms of emissions. I receive.
Mr. Alcuri, and thank you, Ms. Gillis. Mr. Brassou-Duval, go ahead.
Monsieur.
Chair, I've taken the committee's time, enough of its time with my motions, so I will just give my speaking time to the following questioner. Thank you.
Backrack, floor is yours for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Gillis, I'd like to return to these questions around climate accountability and the infrastructure expenditures. As I mentioned in my question to the minister, the response that we got to our order paper question showed some pretty surprising results in terms of the number of projects that didn't undergo any climate lens assessment. 15 of the projects that were assessed showed zero emissions. I'm wondering if you could explain how an infrastructure project has zero greenhouse gas emissions.
Ms. Gillis.
So thank you for the question. So as you're looking at projects within Infrastructure Canada, as you're well aware, there is a climate lens requirement, as the minister also mentioned today, for projects that are over 10 million and green projects. The climate lens, as it stands currently, requires project proponents to undertake an assessment and certify by professionals on the analysis that is undertaken by that climate lens assessment. So within the examples that you're quoting, that would be related to that particular assessment. Now, it could be there's a resilient factor and there's a GHG emission factor. Sometimes a project requires one or the other, and sometimes both. So depending on the type of project that you're looking at, there may in fact not be an emission reduction.
Mr. Backrack.
Well, I wasn't referring to emission reductions. I was referring to greenhouse gas emissions. So my understanding is those 15 projects showed zero greenhouse gas impact whatsoever. And I'm just trying to understand how that could be the case. What kind of infrastructure project would result in zero emissions?
So I thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. I'd have to look at those particular projects, but it could be maybe a playground. Maybe I don't know. I'd have to look at the projects and the analysis. I wouldn't want to guess.
Mr. Backrack.
So I guess I keep trying to get at the nub of this, but you're going to spend $180 billion between now and 2030 on infrastructure. There's a 10 megaton target for greenhouse gas reductions. How did the department arrive at that 10 megaton target? How was it selected? Why 10? Why not 50? Why not 5?
So thank you for the question, Chair. For the $187 billion infrastructure plan overall, that involves 21 departments and 85 programs. The climate lens that we're talking about, although with the enhanced climate plan, there is discussion for a climate lens overall, is regarding Infrastructure Canada's programming regarding disaster mitigation, the integrated bilateral agreements programs. So that's where the applicability of that comes from. In designing the plan originally, like 4 or 5 years ago, that they were looking at what are the opportunities for the types of projects that were going to be coming through the integrated bilateral agreements. Although, granted, we do not select the projects. It is up to the communities and the provinces to prioritize and then bring them to us. So in looking at the types of green, there's just under $10 billion in the green stream for opportunities for investments, and 45% of that particular stream must be on emission reduction targets. So that's what the original thinking was.
Thank you, Ms. Gillis, and thank you, Mr. Bachrach. We're now going to move on to the Conservatives. Mr. Shipley, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today. I think I'm going to start off with Mr. Campbell, if I could, Chair. Mr. Campbell, I noticed in your bio that you're from the transition office. When was first transitioning to the Canada Infrastructure Bank, was there a business plan originally created for the transition to this?
Thank you for the question, and Mr. Chair. And I was the executive director in charge of the government's effort to support and build out the Canada Infrastructure Bank between Infrastructure Canada and Finance Canada, which was largely around a plan moving towards the legislation that was brought before Parliament. So at that juncture, there was a plan towards seeking the legislative authority, which was achieved in June of 2017. And then at the same time, a chairperson was appointed. And then we worked with that chairperson on behalf of the corporation to develop its first corporate, which became its business plan that evolved over the next couple of years of building out the bank.
Mr. Shipley.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Mr. Campbell. So very reassuring to hear there was a business plan. Any business venture that starts up, whether you're selling hamburgers to shoes to whatever, that has a business plan that obviously involves targets and goals. Would you be able to tell me, Mr. Campbell, what the targets or goals of that original business plan was for projects or for dollars complete?
Mr. Campbell.
Going forward.
Yeah, well, first off, after Parliament had approved authority for the 35 billion, the government's fiscal framework and policy in the budget set out that 35 billion would have a net fiscal expense of 15 billion, and then it was spread out over time. So given it was not clear what the projects would be at what profile, there was an estimated amount per year of a couple of $1 billion a year back end loaded. I don't have those figures at my disposal, but it started with a smaller amount ending up at around $2 to $3 billion a year at the end of 10 years. So that was the financial plan, if you will, that was coupled with an operational plan of setting up the entity and then really going out to consult with province, territories, municipalities, and Indigenous groups, as well as investors, as to what the projects would be. And then the government's plan was to adjust that fiscal financial profile based on the response that's received, which is not unusual for setting up these type of entities.
Mr. Shipley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So would you say then the original business plan, and I'm just getting to learn about the Canada Infrastructure Bank, even though I was a municipal councillor for many, many years, I'll be honest with you, it was never discussed about in our municipality. Would you say then obtaining no projects complete in the first 3 or 4 years was not part of the original business plan?
Mr. Campbell.
I'd say we went back and as the lead of helping the government and the new corporation set out that plan, it was prospective, and that it was really going to depend on market response as to a project coming forward in either under an integrated bilateral agreement or the CIB. But given the CIB's details and its offering was not available to, say, a municipality, there was no way to know what project would potentially come forward. There was some major projects that were underway, such as the REM, but those still needed to be negotiated and structured. And we had anticipated from the experience, including PPP Canada and others, that it may take several years to identify a project identify potential structures. The private sector typically would want to come in early and help design it before it moved forward. So we had planned accordingly that it may take some time for the structures to come together. Last point is the CIB has from then and today an advisory and an educational mandate, because they knew in early days a lot of the bank is going to be helping municipalities, provinces, and Indigenous groups imagine what the power of that tool could be and how to partner with the private sector. So we put more operational emphasis on that outreach and development rather than necessarily building out the systems to handle investments, which we knew were going to take time to do that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Shipley, and thank you, Mr. Campbell. We're now going to move on to our last speaker of the afternoon, Mr. Sidhu. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Gillis, Mr. Campbell, Ms. McKay, and Ms. Mitchell for being with us today. I'd like to thank your department for the important work you are doing for communities across Canada, especially here in Brampton. The $45 million recent investment by the federal government into Brampton Transit, which is the largest investment into Brampton Transit in over 10 years. And to my understanding, the federal Liberal government has invested 13 times more than the previous government into transit, which will support so many communities across Canada. So thank you for the wonderful work. Ms. Gillis, I have been reading about clean power projects across the country and how they can reduce greenhouse gas emissions and help us achieve our emission reduction targets. The Canada Infrastructure Bank has committed to invest $5 billion in clean power projects across the country and $2.5 billion in the next 3 years. Can you talk about what kinds of projects the Canada Infrastructure Bank would be looking at funding in the clean power area?
Ms. Gillis.
Thank you, Chair. And that is a really important area that has been a focus. It's also part of the growth plan in what the bank will be concentrating on in the next 10 years. Certain areas like transmission for provinces that have high dependency on coal and need to transition off coal are important types of projects like the Atlantic Loop that the CIB is involved in, and renewable energy like the bank is involved in. They have made some commitments in discussions with District Energy in BC, as well as wind power in Nova Scotia. So those are some of the areas of opportunity, but I will ask my colleague, Glenn Campbell, to talk a little bit more about some of the work in this area.
Mr. Campbell.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So under the rubric of the clean power, and as the deputy said, there are renewable type projects. For example, the CIB is undertaking an advisory engagement with the Northwest Territories, both the territories, utility and Indigenous groups about how to increase the megawatts of power and clean power in that region over time and bring in private investment to help them manage some of their engineering risks, but also to more efficiently deliver power in the north. In BC, for example, there's talk both around renewable projects, but also transmission lines supporting First Nations and how to bring clean power to enable the natural gas industry that's burgeoning in the central part of British Columbia. Again, just dialogue at this stage, but now we're starting to see real responsiveness on behalf of the utilities once they see the value of what it might be to partner. Similarly, between Manitoba and Saskatchewan, there's some discussions about how do the two journeys partner together and do things a little bit more bold and not the traditional way utilities have done it and bring in partners. Finally, the Atlantic Loop that my Deputy Gillis had mentioned, which I'm involved in, given a number of departments are supporting that effort, including our own infrastructure tools, to see how a backbone of transmission line can get clean power from Labrador and or Quebec in to help New Brunswick and Nova Scotia move off like coal power generation. I think it's clear that the risk and ingenuity that needs to be managed on both sides, that bringing private partners and capital into some of those equations can relieve burden on both the ratepayer and the taxpayer. And to go back to, I think, an earlier comment, there are many large pension institutional investors that are looking to recycle pensioners' capital and others' capital into these long-term assets and really partner with governments to achieve public policy purposes. And now even private funds, given their move towards investor demand for ESG and climate-friendly investments, having partners in clean power and distribution really meshes. It's a win-win-win if we can do it. And we need the CIB there largely because these complex deals need that balancing and structuring to make that work. And so this area, it holds a lot of promise. These projects are big and complex in any event. And I think they, they're an area where I think the CIB can bring a lot of value.
Thank you for that, Mr. Campbell. And Mr. Chair, how much time do I have left?
You have about about 35 seconds.
Okay, I won't be able to get my questions pretty long. I'll just take this opportunity to thank the department for the wonderful work you guys are doing. Thank you for taking the time to join us. I know communities across Canada really appreciate your hard work. So thanks once again for being here today.
Thank you, Mr. Sidhu, and thank you to everyone. Before I do let everyone go, two things. One, I do want to thank obviously members for their participation and their questions today, and equally, if not more important, the answers and dialogue with Minister McKenna, as well as equally as important, her team. Thank you for your time today and being a part of the interventions. Lastly, to members of committee, we do have our next steps with respect to the report and the impacts on the airline industry from COVID-19. And with that, we will need drafting instructions from each individual party. So what I'm requesting of members of your parties, so one from the Liberals, one from the Conservatives, one from the Bloc, one from the NDP, that we receive no later than next Thursday, March 4th, drafting instructions so we can hand those to the analyst, and of course they would come back with a draft report. Is everybody okay with that? Is there any questions on that? No questions? Mr. Clerk, do you want to add anything?
Just that if members could send those to the committee's email, just at tran@parle.gc.ca, so to the clerk, and then I'll hand them off to the analysts. That's it.
Okay. And with that, is there any further questions, members, with respect to today's agenda and our next meeting date? I know we got a break week next week, so unless you guys want to come back out on Tuesday and Thursday next week and meet, I see Taylor smiling. I'm sure you're okay with that. No, Terrence? No, Stephanie, no. Okay, so I guess following next week, we're going to be meeting on Tuesday and Thursday. And once again, hopefully we can get those drafting instructions into the clerk quickly as possible so we can get them to the analyst. Other than that, good job today, folks, and have a great evening. I adjourn.